Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Jazz great Dave Koz brings his Summer Horns tour to the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia on Thursday night. We spoke about his prolific Grammy-nominated career, as well as his approach to interviewing other musicians on his syndicated radio show. Hey, Dave. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
My pleasure, Jason. Nice to talk with you.
We're talking because you are coming to the historic Birchmere for a show on Thursday, September 16th, 7:30 p.m. Tell us about the show. I know you have some folks, it says, and friends. So who are the friends that'll be joining you?
Some very talented friends. This is a really exciting tour for us. It's another Summer Horns tour. And this year, the Summer Horns lineup includes one of the greatest tenor saxophone players of all time, my favorite living tenor saxophonist, Kirk Whalum. We have an original Summer Horns member going back 7 years, Mindy Abair will be back with us. And then a young, I like to call him the Wonderkind. His name is Vincent Ingala. He's 28 years old, and over the last several years has created quite a name for himself with a bunch of hit singles, and he's such a talented kid. He plays wonderful saxophone, but also great guitar and drums he plays in this show, and keyboards. And so the four of us with a killer band have been doing this Summer Horns tour since the beginning of, I guess it was sometime in July that we started. And it's an interesting, weird time to be out on the road, to say the least. But one thing I can tell you is we needed it, and it seems very apparent that the audience has needed live music to come back. It's a very healing experience.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, you said you just got back out on the road in July. So how did you spend the pandemic? For a live musician, it must have just been completely, a weird time.
I was like, I should record some music for people during this time period, maybe put this time period to better use. And so I made a virtual album, 100% virtual album that came out in October of 2020. And the nice thing was that everybody was home. We started working on it, writing songs virtually in April of 2020. And so I could call people like David Sanborn and Bob James and Brian McKnight and say, can I send something over to you, a little sketch of a song? And they would be like, yes, send it over right now. Can you send it today? Everybody had this pent up energy that they wanted to utilize. And we would get these tracks back that were so filled with joy and amazing energy. So this album came together really, really quick. And then I made a follow-up album in the studio with Corey Wong, this young guitarist out of Minnesota. And we did that one in September of 2020. So I feel like I put the pandemic to good use, making some music that I'm very proud of. And hopefully it provided some comfort to people in the way that my feel-good musical heroes provided to me.
Awesome. Well, whenever I have someone like yourself of your stature on, I like to see how, take it back to the beginning, how you got into music in the first place. So obviously you grew up in California, I guess born in Encino, right? But how did you actually fall for music? What music was on and your parents playing in the house, or, you know what I mean? Like, how did you get into music in the beginning?
Well, music was wafting from various rooms of my house. My parents were big fans of the Great American Songbook and crooners and singers, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. So I had a nice dose of that. My brother was listening to sort of progressive rock and jazz. My sister was a pop music fanatic. So I got it from all different sides growing up. But I think the clincher was my brother, who's a wonderful musician still to this day. Way back when, had a band that was playing weddings and bar mitzvahs, fraternity parties. He was about 4 years older than me, and I just wanted to be in that band because they didn't have to have jobs flipping burgers on the weekends. They were playing music on the weekends, and that looked so cool to me. Of course, my brother said, "You're never going to get in this band. Doesn't matter how you try; it's never going to happen." But one day he kind of relented, and this was during the 70s, late 70s, when every song on the radio had a saxophone solo, but they didn't have a saxophone player in their band. So I said, I need to get in this band. He said, well, the only way that you would get in is if you played saxophone. And I was going into the 7th grade at the time. I was 13 years old, and that's when I picked up the sax for the first time. And admittedly, it just felt right in my hands. And I practiced my you know what off for 2 years, drove my brother crazy until finally one day, in a moment of weakness, he relented and said, "Try. Okay, you can come and play this wedding with us this Saturday night, and I'm going to pay you $10 to come and play." And I did, and I did an okay job, and I got in the band, and so that's how it started.
Wow, I'm glad that you finally. Thanks for sharing that story about how you got into jazz instruments too. Um, so I know in terms of your career blossoming and growing at that point, weren't you a member of Richard Marx's band and toured with him from the late '80s and early '90s? What was it like playing with him? I mean, I know he had that big song Right Here Waiting, but he had a couple actually. But just memories of that time in your career.
Well, I before my first record came out, I had a few different people that I toured with. One was Jeff Lorber, a jazz fusion pioneer. One was a singer named Bobby Caldwell, and then I was managed by the same person that managed Richard Marx. And this manager said, "Why don't you play in Richard's band, and you'll get a chance to." We were on the same label, Capitol Records. You'll be able to tour the country and meet radio people and retail people. And okay, I'll do it. And it was an amazing experience because I watched Richard. Our first show was like at this tiny little club for 100 people. And on the same tour, Jason, the same tour that lasted probably 14 or 15 months, when it ended, we were playing to an arena of 20,000 people, all there to see him. So it was like watching the anatomy of a hit song and then a follow-up hit and another hit after that, and watching a career grow in front of my eyes. And this was amazing to have that experience before my first record came out. And obviously I've never, I'm not playing to arenas of 20,000 people, but just having that experience was invaluable to see how somebody else could do it, so that I could apply some of those techniques to my own career when I got my chance.
For sure. And I want to get into, your solo career in a second, because I know you signed with Capitol Records, but even before that, around that same time, weren't you, practicing your chops, getting some experience on national television, on, some late night talk shows?
Yeah. The Pat Sajak show, which was on CBS in the late 80s. The band leader was one of my sax heroes named Tom Scott, and he hired me to be in the band. And when that show ended, I got kind of recruited from Arsenio Hall to do one night a week, and I did that for about a year. And that was during the height of his popularity. Everybody was watching that show. And he was a huge music fan. He loved jazz music and loved putting jazz artists on his show. And so the timing of that with the start of my career was just, you couldn't ask for a better opportunity to be on national television once a week while you're getting your career off and running. And so I'm tremendously appreciative of Arsenio and what he did for me. I'll never forget those times too. There was a lot of fun.
For sure. All right. Well, without further ado, into your own work. I guess it was a self-titled debut, like in what, like 1990. And
Uh-huh.
then Lucky Man, the dance, saxophonic, that gets nominated for a Grammy. You're off to the races. But how do you, how do you think you sort of, in your own work, not the Richard Marx stuff, but your own work, how do you think your own sound sort of evolved from that solo debut all the way to saxophonic? If you had to, put it into words, how much do you think you sort of grew and figured this thing out?
Well, I think it's probably the same for most new artists. And Jason, you have to remember, I'm not sure how old you are, but you have to remember the business, the record business, when I first started in the early 90s, it's unrecognizable from the way it is now.
Sure.
Things have changed so much. It's quite astonishing. But back then, when I was making my first record, all I wanted to do, I was a brand new artist, all I wanted to do was have enough success to make a second record. But I had no expectations because nobody knew me, and I was just starting out. But that first record had a hit on it, and it got me to make a second record for Capitol, and that record kind of blew up. My second record went gold, and all of a sudden, I was off to the races. And then subsequently, it's always been a quest to find new layers of my musicality. And I'm still on that quest this many years later, trying to just find different aspects of who I am musically to represent on recorded music. And that's a fun thing. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do. It's a great honor to be still able to make music and still have people that are interested in the new music that I make. In 2020, I released two different. Well, actually, one came out in 2020. The other one came out in 2021. But I made them both in the year 2020, new albums. And so it's just it's kind of like a pinch me moment. I still get a chance to make albums. I've made 20 of them now, and each one of them is like a chapter in my musical life. And when I look back, some of those older albums, some things I'm not so proud of, but other things I am proud of still. And it's just like being able to grow up and to age and to live a life with a fan base that has been incredibly loyal has meant the world to me. And they've gone along with me every step of the way. And for that, and a ton of other reasons, I'm incredibly grateful.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, 20 albums, that's no joke. That's how to build a following right there. I'm sure you built a lot of other followers through your syndicated radio show. I guess that began in like 94, but you were just speaking about how the music industry's changed so much, and that was when music radio was was to have a talk show on what was it, like a smooth jazz station, I guess. To have that was like a big deal. Everyone listened to radio then. Memories of just hosting that and stepping into that role, because it's one thing to be a musician or a band leader on late night or something, but to actually step into that that host chair on your own self-titled radio show. I mean, that's a whole different ball of wax.
It sure was, and I had no experience whatsoever in that realm. But there was a guy who was running a network, a syndication network, who had this idea before anybody else. Now it's kind of commonplace, but this was really new when he came to me, mid 90s, and said, we want to create a show, a syndicated show that's hosted by an artist in that format, and we're going to do it in a variety of formats. And it was kind of a novel concept, and I was like, I know nothing about hosting a radio show. And he said, that's exactly what we want. We don't want this DJ. We don't want this voice. And I remember the first shows that I did way back when, Jason, I was putting on the radio voice because I thought that's what they wanted. Hi, this is Dave Koz, and you blah, blah, blah. And they said,
I know exactly what you mean. I can't go back and listen to my first stuff.
I mean, it's true, because we have this idea in our heads of what a radio host should sound like, but in reality, when people are listening, it's a very intimate relationship that the listener has with the person on the radio. And if you can be as authentic as you can be and be who you are and not put on the airs of somebody else, that's where the success comes. And in my case, I had great guidance early on from some very wonderful radio professionals that helped guide my abilities. And here we are, I don't know, what is it, 27 years later, and that show is still on the air, uninterrupted. And I do a weekly Sirius XM show as well. And I love being on the radio. I love being a cheerleader and a champion for these great artists in this format. Our music doesn't really get written about or talked about too much in the media. So this is an opportunity to celebrate these great artists that are making the music.
Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for mentioning the Sirius XM show. Remind our listeners what it's called, what channel?
It's on Watercolors, Channel 66 on Sundays, and it's called the Dave Koz Lounge.
Awesome. And then the Dave Koz, the radio show, is that daily, or what is that?
That's on the weekends as well. It's a syndicated show, and it's heard internationally as well. We have about 20 countries that play it as well every weekend. And I can't really recall, maybe about 40 stations that play it in the United States. It used to be a lot bigger when there were a lot more jazz radio stations, but jazz radio has gone through the ringer in the United States. But we'll see where it lands, and hopefully there'll be more stations come on board.
Well, I just think it's really cool that you have those weekly things on radio and satellite radio, where you're highlighting other artists. Because yeah, who was I? A couple weeks ago, I was talking to Chris Thiele and the bluegrass guy,
Oh
and he
yeah.
was because he did his own version of like a Prairie Home Companion, kind of his own sort of spin on that for a while. And he was just saying about how he sort of misses the idea of. Times have changed so much with the internet. Everything's accessible. You can pull up any artist at any time, and it's almost like overstimulation, too much information. He sort of misses those sort of variety shows of yore where someone would curate and say, hey, you might check this artist out. So has that been the rewarding thing for you, is to be, not only for, obviously it's exposure for yourself, but more importantly, has that been the rewarding thing that you get to, maybe introduce someone to an artist they might love?
Well, Chris, by the way, who I got a chance to jam with on a Volfek show at Madison Square Garden, I'll never forget that night. It was, I'd never met him. I was a fan of his music, but I'd never met him. And I was like blown away by his energy. And it really caused me to like up my game substantially that night. It was so much fun. But there's a guy who's an instrumentalist that is really doing amazing things in the world, and we're in a time right now where musicianship is celebrated in a way that it hasn't been, in my mind, for decades, and it's all on the internet. And you're finding these musicians because there's no gatekeepers. You can at one keystroke you can put your if you have something to say, you can put your music up there and distribute it to the world with one keystroke on your computer. And so I think what that has done is it's democratized music to the point where you now have so much amazing musicianship out there. It's overwhelming. And I've had this experience so many times, Jason, where a friend of mine will turn me on to this band that I've never heard of, and I would like, oh, this music sounds really cool. And then I think that I'm like one of the first people to discover them. And then I'll go on Spotify and I'll look at their numbers, and certain songs have 150 million plays, 200 million plays. So this is a common experience for me where you're turned on to music that you think you're discovering, and yet you realize that there's these bands that are toiling in the music world that have huge followings that nobody knows about. It's like, it's really, really funny. It's a head scratcher too. But that's to the point where our business, what I was mentioning before, our business is so unrecognizable to the way it was before. And it's really making it good for the music. I think the fan right now in 2021, the music fan, if you're a fan, it's like the same thing with streaming on television. It used to be there was 3 channels of television and they curated our entertainment. Now there's thousands of shows at our disposal, and it's endless. And if you're a fan of television, you have endless possibilities. And it's the same with music now. It's really exciting.
Oh, for sure. And when you have these bands on your shows, your radio and satellite radio shows, what is sort of your what's sort of your interview process? Because gosh, I've asked so many people over the years. Like Anderson Cooper said, he planned every question and did thorough research, and then Larry King said, "I never." The late Larry King said, I never planned a single question. I just talked." Where do you sort of fall on that? Is it a combo of both, or what's sort of been your philosophy to get people to open up on your show?
Well, one thing is that I think that we have going for us is it's musician to musician instead of interviewer to musician. And I think that there is a certain comfortable familiarity when you're talking to another musician. I'll give you an example. I was interviewing on the phone. I was interviewing George Benson. This is going back a number of years.
On Broadway.
Yeah. And I was talking to George, and because of our schedules, we had to do it on the phone. We couldn't do it in person. And I'm asking him questions, and he's just giving me like 2-word answers, 3-word answers. I'm just not connecting with him. And I'm like, I know George Benson. I've shared the stage with George Benson. And I thought, this is so weird, right? So finally, after a couple questions, he says to me, he said, "Is this the Dave Koz that plays the saxophone, Dave Koz?" And I said, "Yeah, George, that's me. I have a radio show. This is what I do, in addition to playing sax." And he said, "Hey, man, I didn't know this was you." And then I could not get this guy to shut up.
So he opened right up the second that he found out you were on his one of his own.
Yeah, and it really illustrated to me in that experience, Jason, that is the power of that show is musician to musician. And there's like a privileged conversation that can happen. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen. And there's been many, many times, whether it's with Stevie Wonder or Quincy Jones or Burt Bacharach or Herb Alpert. I mean, these legends that have so much to say. When they feel comfortable, they open up like a book, and that's what I want to share with our audience.
Yeah, well, thank you for not giving me one-word answers. Thanks for opening up. I guess we're radio to radio, so that's our bond there, sir.
Good. Well,
But
you're a great interview, and one thing that I want to say about you is that you do your research, and that's something that's very important. It's just maybe you don't plan every question, but being prepared to know your subject, like you prepared for this interview, I can tell, and that's something that I think that makes for a great interviewer. So, way to go, buddy.
nah, it's all you, man. Well, you've received all the thank you for that, but it's all about the guest, really. That makes the interview, I think. So you've gotten so many Grammy nods, all that stuff. But how cool is it to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2009? I mean, I guess you could go two ways with this answer, right? You could shrug it off and say, accolades don't matter. That's what most people do.
Kidding me?
But
That's like it's in the freaking sidewalk, Jason. The star is in the sidewalk. In fact, I actually, because it was so surreal that day, so unbelievable, that because I grew up in Los Angeles and we used to go as a family to the Hollywood Walk of Fame and walk it and see all the names and stuff. And so to have a star is so out of, it's just like, it doesn't even seem real. So occasionally I will go to it. I'll drive to it. It's on Vine Street. It's right in front of the Capitol Records building. And I'll go there just to make sure that it's still there. Because I think that after all these years, I think that somebody made a terrible mistake and put my name in a star that I didn't deserve. But it's still there. Currently, it is still there, and it still feels surreal today as it did the day that it went in.
yeah, I'm sure they were happy when they saw your name come through because they're like, this is only a few letters short. It's a short
That's
name
right.
you put on the star.
No problem. Only 7 letters.
Exactly. 7 letters never sounded so good. Well, man, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the show down at the Birchmere? You know, why, if our listeners, maybe they've seen you before there, or maybe they've never seen you at all, why should they come check you out in this, post-pandemic show? Good to have live music back.
You just said it right there. Live music is back. We're not completely out of the woods yet with COVID, but people need the healing power of music now more than ever, and we do as well. And this tour has been such a joy because I get a chance to share the stage with 3 phenomenal saxophone players. We have an incredible band. The music is full of life and happiness and joy and camaraderie and collaboration. And you get to see different combos of people. There's the 4 of us all together doing a lot of ensemble stuff. We each get a chance to do our solo stuff. There's duos and trios, and it's just fun. And we've been on doing this tour for a few weeks now, and it's been absolutely electric at the performances. People are coming out in droves, which to me is like such a shot in the arm. Even with the craziness that's still going on, people need that fix of live music, and we haven't had it for so long. So this is one of those summers that will, at least for me, I will never forget. It's filled with tremendous joy, and it is a layer of concern that we all are still dealing with, but we still need that healing and energy that only live music can provide. So I'm really excited to bring this show to the Birchmere, which, by the way, is one of my favorite venues in the country to play. And we don't play it very often, so this is really a nice, exciting thing to bring this show, which is a big show, to a really intimate, wonderful venue there in your part of the world. So we're excited to be bringing Summer Horns to the Birchmere. Can't wait to play it.
For sure. And nice double meaning there, intentional or pun intended or not, about, live music feels like a shot in the arm to you.
Yes. I didn't even realize that. That was unintentional, but thank you for making that connection.
Oh, always got to call out a pun, whether it was intentional or not. I'll give you credit for it anyway. But yeah, maybe our listeners, you've got your shot in the arm, then come out to the Birchmere and get that shot in the arm feeling of watching a live music again.
Nice
Dave, thanks so much. This is a real treat getting to chat with you. Congrats on all of the success over the years, and good luck at the show at the Birchmere.
Thank you very much. Great talking with you too, Jason.
All right, we'll catch you later.
All right, bye-bye, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.